Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality, and where we talk about all kinds of strange things, paranormal things, ETs, UFOs, and also ancient history. And we get involved in a little bit of everything. And that's why I like kind of having different guests and different expertise, different investigative skills. And that brings in an interest, and it kind of covers everything that we want to cover in life, especially spirituality, consciousness. And I have a guest today, and I wanted to mention we did talk about this lunar eclipse, in which I'm close but not close enough to see the full eclipse. It'll be about 80 miles south of me, so I'll miss that part of it, but I will have some eclipse here. So my guest and I were talking. His name is Michael Freehawk Polani, and we were talking about this eclipse, and we think it's going to bring some good consciousness to those that are awakening. I heard that. And I think that's the best thing I've heard is that people that have been awakening for the last couple of years, they're going through all this turmoil, that I think now this could be a start of opening up another door for us to gain more consciousness. And we talked about Native American Indians, and Michael Freehawk Polani is a Native American Indian. And I must say, the sci-fi book that I just wrote, since I got a Native American Indian in me, it's about 15-20%, but it's there. My grandparents, I saw a lot more of it there. But I do have an open heart for Native American Indians. I want to make that right out. Michael Freehawk Polani is a part Native American Indian, and we didn't get into the amount, but he'll tell us a little bit about that, and that's probably where he's gotten some of his I guess cultural. They're claiming that Native American Indians are closer to a lot of the cultural things and the beliefs and spiritual matters than we are, and I really agree with that, and that's why that's another reason why I didn't tell Michael, but that's another reason why I wanted to search him out as a guest, because that's part of how I feel about Native American Indians. Michael Freehawk Polani was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was an experiencer from a very young age and researcher of the paranormal and related topics for over 25 years. Michael has been a presenter at many UFO conferences and a guest on numerous podcasts and radio shows. His field work, his detailed research into the crop formation phenomena, has played a large role on his spiritual path of awakening. Follow Michael's work here at https://www.facebook.com/Michael Polani slash. So you can look him up on Facebook, and I'm sure if you Google him, you'll also find him on Google networks. And Michael Freehawk Polani, welcome to the show, buddy. And you got anything to add on what's going on with you right now, and anything to add to your bio?
Well, first, let me say thank you, Dave, for having me on. It took us a little while to get it together, but I
Yes.
appreciate your accommodation and especially on a auspicious day such as today
Yes.
with the eclipse. So a lot of good energy in the air, and yeah, we'll touch upon some of that, I'm sure. As far as the bio goes, I think you nailed it. I think everything that I've done is really right there, and we'll talk about some of
Yeah.
that.
And I bragged about your bio being in large print and condensed and concise and great. That's how I like 'em, you know. Uh, but I'm glad to get you here on the show, and you do have some. As a child, you had numerous experiences that range from sightings of craft in the skies, spirits and ghostly apparitions, and paranormal activity. So, could you tell us a little bit about that? How you got started as a child in all this, I guess, paranormal stuff, or I don't call UFO and ETs paranormal. I really don't. I separate the two. There's a different type of action there. But Michael, could you explain to us how you got started as a child?
Sure. Well, it did start at a very young age. I grew up, as you said, in the San Francisco Bay Area on a peninsula in a city called Redwood City. And it was really that time as a child in the house that I grew up in. I could feel there were some things going on there. At the time, of course, I didn't know quite how to explain it. If what I was feeling, other people were feeling, was it normal? Was it not normal? So at a very young age, I realized that there were things that were present that our physical eyes couldn't see. But I also learned at the same time that I could feel things, subtle energies, fluctuations in the space around me. Um, to this day, some of those things I don't know to this day if they were disembodied spirits, if it was other kind of activities, ET activities. I could tell you by the time I was 12, that's the time that really kind of blew me open. At 12 years old, I did have what it appears, and when I say appears, I mean through regression. I did some very effective, helpful aggression with Barbara Lamb,
Right.
and Barbara did a fantastic job. I was under for about 5 hours in total, and I pulled out a lot of the things that happened in that experience at 3:15 in the morning. 12 years old in my bed, and it looks like there was a physical interaction at that time. So that was really the big one. That kind of permeated into my adult years, and you know how things can be put on the back burner because
Hmm.
of life, whether it's high
Right.
school, college,
Yes.
marriage, starting a family, and then something comes along and acts as a trigger. And that experience when I was 12 years old was actually triggered and had kind of a total recall on that from a chapter that I read. Oh God, it was probably in the 90s of Ed Walters' book of Gulf Breeze.
Right. Yeah.
There was a paragraph in there that he mentioned something while he was in bed, something touching his feet, remembering that feeling, remembering that encounter, and then it all just kind of came back, and it was like, wow, that wasn't a dream. There was something there, and thankfully for Barbara, there was things that were pulled out of there that definitely substantiated what I experienced. There were some physical, what to say, physical markings, ramifications left from that,
Hmm.
and then it all began to make sense. And yeah, the childhood was very interesting to say the least.
Right. Well, Barbara Lamb is a very famous person in regression, and she's a hypnotist, and she's also a doctor, I believe, in psychology. And
Right.
I met her back in 2010. I sat beside her, uh, right beside her, and we talked, and it was at a conference in Alamo, Nevada, and Travis Walton was speaking at that convention. It was when he first started doing the circuit, and she had a couple of people there that were interesting, and she regressed you. Did Michael, did you see the ETs or the craft in your regressions?
Yes and no. I saw the bodies, the physical outlines. The faces were the best way I can describe it is when you're looking at a photo and somebody maybe publishes a photo and there's people in there that you don't or they don't want you to see and they'll blur out the faces
Yes.
of those
Mhm.
people. That's exactly what it looked like during the regression. It was fuzzy. It looked like it was intentionally blurred out for whatever reason. Barbara suggested that if we did more, I could probably go deeper and probably uh, get a little bit more detail on the face, but I could tell you they were humanoid. They came through the wall that was parallel to my bed. And it was kind of I would say now in my language today as an adult, kind of like a portal that opened up in the wall. And they just stepped right through. And it appears initially, again, I wouldn't have really thought this, but during the regression, it seems there was some physical healing that was being done, which would match with my physical, what would I say? When I was 12, I had an intestinal colon issue,
Okay.
without going into too much detail, that needed healing. And there was some internal bleeding at that time. And it looks like from what I can put the puzzle pieces together, that there was something that was done um, to my lower area. To be specific, I was laying at the time in my bed on my stomach, and it was something. What was discernible at the time was a weight on the back of my neck, and this weight had a lot of pressure, and it was pushing very slowly but methodically, pushing my face into my pillow. And I remember it kept going. It was very slow, kept going, and I just kind of laid there as a child, thinking, "Okay, what's going on right now? I don't. I know I'm awake. I'm looking at my digital clock that says 3:15, and I know I'm in my room, and maybe it's the family dog, and nope, it's not my family dog because I slept with my door closed and usually locked at the time, which my parents didn't like at the time. Um, but I would lock the door, and I knew it wasn't that. So all these things are kind of going through my mind and trying to figure out what's going on. Well, in the meantime, my face is going deeper, and I just felt this. There was a little bit of a panic. So that went on for a while. And the end result from what I got out of the regression was whatever was happening with my neck was acting as like almost like a to keep me calm, to keep my body still. Cause I remember I couldn't move. And I kind of questioned myself, was it because I didn't want to move or I couldn't move? And at the time I really didn't know. But there was something going on while the neck was being pressured. It was almost like a comparison to an epidural that a woman would have during childbirth, where the rest of her body was just able to be still and maybe no pain or no sensation of anything happening. And the work was being done down in my tailbone, kind of colon area. So that explained where I had some, would have now, it's known as scoop marks on my tailbone, have a very interesting pattern, very symmetrical scoops and kind of a C formation that looks like it was made with a compass. I mean, it's absolutely perfect. And I've had it looked at, and the doctors or physicians would look at it and go, "I really don't know what that would come from." The way it healed, the scar tissue, the perfect symmetry of it. Don't really have an answer. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that's fine. I was just asking. I was just wondering if you had an opinion," not telling them the history of that. But that did come out in the regression with Barbara. So yeah, a lot going on there. I have more regression work to do, but I just haven't done that yet because there's been more than that occasion.
Well, thank you for a very detailed description. I think what you're talking about, I've been there too, just like you, 3 o'clock in the
Right?
morning, and I've been abducted several times. I got it in my book,
Yeah.
and you probably, Barbara Lamb probably wrote you up in one of her stories or one of her books or something. You might
Yeah.
find out if she did. And it sounds like you have book material yourself that you could probably work on a book.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about, that heavy weight, and you're able to see. I've been there too, where I was able to see what was going on, but I couldn't move. And that weight that you felt was a magnetic energy that they put on you that actually paralyzes you. It's their uh, it's their way of knocking you out, I guess, in your body, so they can do work on you. And I believe they do, actually intervene with us and help us in our health wise. I think I've been intervened, and I hope they keep going because I'm an old man now. I hope they keep keep doing that for me. But yeah, but they're not all bad. I mean, that's the thing about it. Now you find that there's a lot of nonsense going on around regarding paranormal, and and what's your opinion in today's research and even some of the investigation tools being used? I know there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, a lot of CGI, and a
Right.
lot of people talking about this and that and evil ETs, and we don't know if these are government informants that are paid to troll and try to debunk everything that people put out there. What is your feeling on that, since you brought it up in your notes, Michael?
Well, like you said, Dave, there are a lot of individuals out there who, I mean, I think we know by now they're literally hired to muddy the waters, in what's happening in this field. Boy, did I realize that in the crop circle, crop formation community a long time ago. I learned that when I did some field investigation, and just seeing how this game is played for a lot of these individuals. There's a lot of deception. There's a lot of the shell game. Look over here while this is being done over here.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think it runs rampant throughout um, every aspect of this conversation, from the UFO to crop formation to spirits to, are there's evil reptilians versus the benevolent, Pleiadian, Arcturian, things like that. There's a It's a big mess, I have to say, and for folks like you and I, we can just really, stand in our own truth and just go by what we've personally experienced. Because as you know, there's a huge difference between a belief and a knowing. And I try to speak from my knowing as much as possible. And when I say knowing, I mean, what have I experienced, one on one with this phenomena? Um,
Nicely said, Michael. That's very well said. That's how I feel. A lot of contactees feel the same way. And I talk about there's three ways you can be abducted. You can have a bedside abduction, in which you just explained, and then you can have a on board. They take you on. They beam you up, tractor beam, whatever. They take you on board and work on you. And I've had regress dreams of that too, being on board. And the third way, in which is a way that has been kind of new to some people I discuss, I've been frozen 6 times in 6 different years on the same date, August 11th through August 13th. And 6 times my doctor couldn't explain that. I was deeply frozen, like I was dead. It's around 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. Same thing,
hmm,
bewitching art. But that's another way that they freeze your body. They take your essence. They take some of your energy to maintain your soul across into another dimension. But I don't have no recollection or no recall. All I remember is shaking so hard that the bed shake, and my wife did not wake up. And normally she wakes up with a cell phone that hits a soft carpet floor. She'll say, "What was that?" But here I am, a big guy, and I was shaking the bed. It was probably shaking all the dressers and everything, and she didn't wake up, so they must have knocked her out. But
wow.
that's a third way. There's another way that they invade or they invade our minds, and they can control our minds, implant memories, take out memories. They check us out. That's how they check us out, through that way too. But how do you feel about those three different types? And I know you just mentioned a bedside abduction. How do you feel about those other types, Michael?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Dave. I can speak best to the bedside because I've been there. But I mean, I think like you, after I realized what was happening in my life, I became somewhat of a student of what happens globally with this phenomena. And there's some stories that just make you shake your head and go, "Boy, is that real, or did they really get taken up in their car?" you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and yes, and some of my favorite contact or just physical experience, close encounter, three kind, fourth kind, fifth kind. These things do happen, and for anybody who says they don't, they're just not doing the level of homework that they need to see what's really going on out there. So
Right.
the three types that you just mentioned, yeah, I totally agree, and they all happen equally.
Yeah. There's two things that I've learned in talking with a lot of people like you that's had experiences or investigators. There's one thing that I've learned about our ancient history and our peoples and your people, in which I just told you that I really respect a lot, because they have this folklore and they have a history, and they know about a lot of this consciousness and this dream world that sometimes we get in. And also found out that the ancient people, like I say, Egyptian and beyond, the Sumerians and everything, they were taught at one point this knowledge by the ETs. I have to believe 260,000 years they taught humans. But then they let them go. And then the humans, they had their own knowledge, their own wisdom, in which they carried on throughout thousands of years. And then they took kind of control of that. I believe that too, that a lot of this stuff was invented by us humans after we were taught as students, as you called it, and we were students and we learned from the ETs. The other thing too about believing people in their experiences, and you got the three abduction types that I talk about, but that third type, the mental type, the one that they get into your consciousness and they go in and they implant things, and people have these cerebral experiences. They're mostly like in a dream world. Are those real or not? Now, I've learned to accept them as real because the ETs can get into our minds and our consciousness. Is that how you feel also, Michael?
Absolutely. I mean, it's I'm always of the belief that when we're talking about something like this, that you know, on one hand, I think the word imagination gets a bad rap
Mm.
because imagination is really where the bulk of creation comes from,
Right,
and using that thought and that imagination is an amazing gift. But at the same time, people will hear your story and they go, "Oh, well, it was probably your imagination." Poo-pooing it in the way that they do with something like placebo.
right.
It's become a bad word all of a sudden, and it's not valid. I don't believe that at all. I think that what you mentioned, the ETs beings, whether they're multidimensional as we are, ultra dimensional. I mean, there's all different kinds of beings of frequency that they they use uh, different methods, and we're an intentional species, and we are amazing in our own right. And when it comes to looking at the situation that you just described, being cerebral things, the ancient cultures talk about that.
Mm.
Like what you and I are doing right now is not the real world. Uh, we are discussing it, but the dream state, when we are in the astral, when we are in that other state, that's the real world. That's where we connect to our higher self, the higher frequencies, the higher beings. That's where we pull in the information, the wisdom, the codes, some people will say. So I totally agree with you, because right now what we're dealing with is just of a 3D realm, and we are so much more than that.
Well, scientists claim that when we sleep, we go to the fifth dimension, and that's where we obtain our dreams. So, like I said, I at first, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, well, I've been on radio in and out of my life, but 4 or 5 years ago, I was intensely involved in UFO shows and ET shows, and also my own stories at first as a guest. But I've looked at these cerebral things as being, and there's a lot of skeptics out there, and I ran into a couple of them on radio, and they'll say, "But you can't prove it. It's a dream. It's a dream." So yeah, it's hard to prove when it's a dream, but actually the details is what you want to look for, and what they went through, and then compare that to all the other abductees or contactees, in which a lot of people are wanting to be called, because if you're a contactee, that means they've come back and visit you more than one time. They do a follow-up. You mentioned something about crop circles. Michael, did you learn something from crop circles? Were you able to read them or feel them?
Absolutely. I think my first crop formation that I was actually in and had a chance to feel those energies was, oh man, maybe 2003,
Mhm.
2004.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. I should say that usually when either I give a presentation or a podcast like this, and show my slides and the healing properties and so forth and so on, they go, "Well, you must have been to England and done a lot of research there in the UK." And actually, no, I have never been to the UK. The bulk of my research in person, in the fields, doing the field work, have been between California and the state of Arizona, believe it or not. So they are global, and yeah, they are everywhere, including California and Arizona. So in Arizona, I had a big one in 2007, but the 2003, 2004, that was the first time I got in a what I will call, and for all intents and purposes, every bit of research that was done, I can confidently call it an authentic formation, which was by definition for me is non-man-made. Something else did it.
Right.
Um, I walked, and that's interesting because just recently I dug these out, and I still have uh,
Okay.
the bent nodes
Yes.
from all the formations that I've done the research in, and there is a discernible, totally different energy in an authentic one and a man-made one. So I simply would put my palms about an inch or two above the ground and just go within. And I've, and I don't know if it was from my experience when I was 12, but I've always had since then that I can remember the gift of feeling the subtle energies, especially for with my hands.
Mhm.
Yes, we have our senses that we can sense things, but that's the reason that I do a lot of have clients in addition to my day job that I do a lot of Reiki type energy work for clients.
Is that what
And
those certificates are behind you on the wall?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
going to ask you about those certificates.
yeah,
What is that one? That's for Reiki on your, I guess it'd be on your left shoulder, and then higher up you have other certificates. So yeah,
yeah.
you're
This one is actually the Reiki one. I think this one is more chakra healing.
okay.
And I do everything from just Reiki, and it's beyond Reiki, but of course the certificate just says Reiki. There's a lot more involved in that. I do some what's been termed Arcturian healing, which I've had some people snicker and giggle at that one. All that means is that it has to do with symbols, very similar to Reiki, and a lot of people don't know that a lot of the Reiki symbols that Mr. Asui, the original form of Reiki, I believe from what I've researched, whether it's been channeled information or just my own personal research, Tom Kenyon had a good book, The Anthology of Arcturians, or the Arcturian Anthology, that he just mentions that the what would I say, the beginning of Reiki actually derived from some kind of Arcturian um, knowledge, intervention, whatever you want to call it, because there are symbols involved too, and symbols hold tons of information, hence the crop formations and their significance. There's a lot of subconscious stuff that goes on with crop formations, like this one here. It's just there's a big download. Symbols encompass a lot
Right.
more
Yes.
than 1,000 words could. So really, to long answer a short question, I could feel the difference in the energy, swirling energies, plasma fields, things like that. Um, and that's really why I got so excited about the formation that I discovered here in Arizona in 2007. That gave me an opportunity to work in conjunction with Dr. William Levengood, who did some amazing work. Um, and actually, Linda Moulton Howe was involved in that one as well. So,
And Nancy Talbert, you mentioned too.
yeah, Nancy Talbot as well. And then only years later did I find out that a lot of the lab work that was done, not only with my um, samples for my formation that I found, but 300 formations prior to mine, that the amazing Penny Kelly was involved in that lab work with Dr. Levengood too. So Penny Kelly has been a big part of my research, and somewhat of a mentor when it comes to really looking at the consciousness and energy that's involved with the authentic crop circle phenomena.
I wanted to ask you the two questions. You mentioned Octurians. Now, the humanoid ETs that walk through your wall, did they
Hmm.
they look like humans, right? And were they pale white and tall or whatever, blonde hair, Or and then I wanted to ask you how much of these crop circles you think are real. And I wanted to add, I do like California, Southern California, and I do like Arizona. I like going to Sedona. Oh my God. I've had some experiences in Sedona that's I could write a whole book on. I wrote just part of the book on Sedona, but I feel, that you're going to the right places, California, you got Nevada and Arizona. But could you tell us if they did look like pale, tall, blondish people, the Arcturians, and how much of the crop circles do you believe are real and are faked, Michael?
Well, the first question, the beings in my room, they are definitely humanoid. They were very slender. I would not take them for the small, typical 3 foot size. They seem to be taller than that.
Mhm.
Now, during my regression, I had different, actually, a couple different perspectives. So there was one perspective where in the regression, I was the observer. So I was actually looking at myself as the 12-year-old in the bed on my stomach with the beings kind of, and I hesitate to say hovering over. It was more like they were just on me or the bed, but it wasn't a full, like, weighted on the bed. It was
Mhm.
somewhat, they're very light. It just seemed weird when I observed it, almost like a remote viewing type of viewing that I could
Mhm.
sense that they were above the bed, but they were on the bed. Um, the faces and the head were there. They were round, but again, the features were just not discernible. And on one hand, that's been a frustration of mine. And then I kind of ask myself, well, why is that so important to me? I'm starting to split hairs now, but there's a part of me that I would like to know what they look like. Because I've become more familiar with the visual aspect of certain ETs.
Right.
And I would like to know what category they kind of fall in. But didn't really see that. Definitely humanoid, definitely slender, but I would say more, and I don't know if it was the lighting of the room at the time because it was 3:15 in the morning, and I remember only the one lone street light on my cul-de-sac that I live would shine through the blinds, so it was very dim. So I tend to say they were kind of grayish, but not in the sense that they were a gray, just grayish. They were light, wasn't a dark color.
Mhm.
Um, Now, with the crop formation question, that one has actually changed. I would say a couple times over the decades, because for a lot of the viewers who aren't aware of the history of crop formations, most of them go back. They say, "Oh yeah, it happened in the '90s. It started."
Mhm.
It goes way back. I mean, we're talking what
Right.
1675 or something.
They
There
call it
was
the
crop formation.
devil's they call it the devil's, triangle or it's the devil's circles in
Yeah,
England,
the
not
yeah the
England.
mowing.
Yeah, in England or whatever. Yeah,
Yep, the mowing devil story, exactly.
right.
So it goes back, a very, very long time. So when you do the history, it takes it out of the realm of man-made, and there's a lot of details that kind of determine that opinion for me. But if we go back just in the recent decades, the the older ones, and I'll say the 70s, 80s, 90s, the majority of those, and there was a lot less, but the majority of those were, I believe, from everything that I've seen and research I've done, were authentic, meaning non-man made.
Mhm.
Now, once the 90s rolled around, and I did have an opportunity, I should say, to sit down and speak with Colin Andrews in the 90s and had some really good conversations, threw around a lot of kind of off the record information. And I found that interesting because that conversation took place about 5 years before I actually had my first real crop formation, I would say, encounter. So I kind of hit the ground running. I knew what to look for. Um, I knew the telltale signs of man-made stuff, and I can tell you that percentage today, unfortunately, and I share the opinion of Freddie Silva, who is very educated on this and author of a great book called Secrets in the Field.
Mhm.
I agree with him that the majority of what's going on today is man-made, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that there still is not a authentic phenomena, because there is. Um, and I don't believe this phenomena was supposed to be around forever. It's kind of like Travis Walton, as you mentioned earlier, going to the same spot every week and being picked up every single week.
Yeah, it doesn't
I
happen.
I don't think that's the way it is, and I
I
believe that's
yeah.
the way with crop formations. It's not supposed to be around forever.
And then some people complain about blurry UFO pictures or blurry pictures of ETs. And I tell them, I said, well, these ETs don't pose for pictures. They
No.
don't, and they will actually blank your camera out.
Yep.
Now you mentioned Chandler Formation. I guess that's where you got your real big start, firsthand experience, and that must have really got you involved in crop circles. What are they telling us, Michael? Especially that Chandler Formation. Is there a message to all this, Michael?
I believe so, Dave, and that's a great example of, you mentioned Sedona, so everything you're talking about is falling right into line with what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is that I currently live about an hour away from Sedona right now. If you're from here, it's Prescott. If you're not from here, it's Prescott.
Yes.
So I live in Prescott, Arizona, and I was in Sedona, I believe, the week prior to me discovering that formation in '07. And I actually put out, one of those messages to the universe that I think all of us do at one time or another in our life, whether it's a difficult moment in our life, or we go through, you know, maybe we left a job, left a relationship, and we're left with, wow, what is my life about right now? What am I doing with my life? And I'm confused. And you kind of look up and go, what am I doing? Give me a sign.
Yeah, I wake up every morning, Michael. About it takes me 20 minutes to get through the fog,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, and it takes a couple of cups of coffee or whatever to get back to life. And you think, and there's so much. I mean, I've been seeing it more and more as I get older. I guess there's so much death and dying. I just had a 50-year-old second cousin, a great young lady, very friendly gal. And she died.
Wow.
It just unexpectedly in this past few months she developed brain lesions, and that caused and I'm looking at it, and I see people in Facebook, and you see it too. They say, I am so sick and tired of death and dying and people, and this is part of the life we have to live. I think it's we in order to know what happiness is and love is, we have to experience the pain in life, I guess. Is that what you're thinking too, Michael? I mean,
Yeah.
uh, that you might have a background in your cultural studies or whatever, but could you tell us what maybe that's all about, the death and dying thing?
Yeah. And I believe that is a part of our experiential cycle here, on this particular earth plane, 3D, 4D. Um, and to tie into what you were asking previously, and I think it has to do with this as well. The crop formations, my experience there, the bottom line is it's interactive.
Hmm.
There's a communication between realities, and I believe that comes into play with what you just asked as well. The death, the dying process, and really what I see this entire process as, meaning life. And I know that's a huge undertaking to sum up in a few sentences, but when we come into this world, it seems like the whole purpose of us being here is obviously to experience, to love,
Hmm.
but it seems like through that process, it is, for me, it can be summed up is, during this process we move away from our divinity, and we move away from the light. But this journey, hopefully, inevitably, it leads us back to the light.
Right.
But we, through that course, we do get away from it. We get further and further away from who we actually are. And again, that divinity, and that again, divinity doesn't mean it's not a religious thing. It's just it's our divine being, it's our divine right that we are an intentional species. We are here for a reason, and it is to experience and love. But during that process, boy, do we go on a big elliptical,
Mhm.
you know, loop around, and it brings us back to this. But along the way, we do experience the death, and I think that death of loved ones,
Mm.
one day it will be us and our physical death. We are shown and taught, just so much, but we're also taught. It's kind of, you can't bring up the conversation of death without entertaining the whole process of living.
Right.
And I think that is why we have this contrast in our world right now, to really hone in on what's important. What
Mhm.
is our purpose here? What are we supposed to be doing? And in a weird way, it's kind of, we can look at that 50-year-old cousin that may have just passed, and they are that mirror to us of,
Yeah,
I'm supposed to be doing something different today, and you know what? I'm going to do it. And
yeah,
I've been putting it off, but I need to do that now.
yeah.
And there's more to it than that, I'm sure. But things that we glean from this time in history is going to be valuable when we move on from this place.
And the awakening of some people have been going on for several years now, and with this lunar eclipse, they say it's going to start. It's going to give you more of your memories, and you can look back through the awakening. But also, you and I and other abductees have experienced other dimensional types of travel, so we know. Just somebody asked me, said, Dave, do we really go somewhere after we die, or we go 6 feet down? Like my dad used to say. Well, he wasn't the ordinary type of guy, but uh, I'd say yes, we go to another dimension. We're going from here to somewhere else, and because I've seen those dimensional travelers come in and go out through that doorway, and you have too. So we know that there is travel from here to somewhere else, and being human is tough. We have this human body in which causes us a lot of our problems. It actually, and other people that die, they're not really dying, they're just moving on to another dimension, and that's what you were summing up. So it is tough being human as we live through all this. But the messages like the crop circles and also what the ETs are trying to tell us, they can't come out and tell us the direct truth about life, because that's something we got to experience. A lot of people say, where's God? We haven't seen God in 2000 years, but he doesn't have to be here. We're here to, like you just said a while ago, we're actually here to learn and
Right.
experience being human before we go on somewhere else. And Michael, you have anything to add to that?
Oh, I totally agree. It's something that I've been blessed with. Um, Communication, and
Mhm.
that word comes up often when we have these conversations. And when you realize the communication, things that it can assist you with on your path. I've had communication from my father, who transitioned in 2017. It took a little while, but he came through,
Mhm.
and he just kind of let me know that he's fine, and we hear that often. He's fine. I had a 12-year-old cousin, not to bring down the positivity of the conversation, but I had a 12-year-old cousin that was murdered by the hands of a serial killer
Oh, wow.
back in the state of California in the 80s, and that was a tough one for me and the family. And it was only, wow, maybe 5 years ago that he finally reached out to me, and it was interesting. It was like a maze of um, messages. He would leave me feathers.
Yeah.
He knew I was very attuned to that. And one day I decided to go to where it happened, and I retraced his footsteps on that day. And that communication was amazingly strong. it brought tears to my eyes. And the bottom line of all that was he's communicating to me, and we're communicating together, and that should really put your mind at ease that this is not the end. There
Yes.
is another, and I've started to use more the word density. There's different densities now because dimensions. There's I think it's all on one plane, but in that dimensional thing, there's different aspects in different densities. So we're in the third density, fourth density,
Yeah. Well,
and
this is not, yeah,
that's where they go, and that's where we're going to go too.
right. And this is not your first rodeo being on the show. You've been on a lot of different shows. Uh, in your discoveries and the research, the channel formation, you were invited to be as a guest speaker in numerous engagements, which includes MUFON twice there in Phoenix. Uh, and then also you said the Dr. Chet Snow's Signs of Destiny. Were you just talking about that? I guess that's what you were talking about. Could you tell us how those conferences come out and what you talked about at MUFON and also Signs of Destiny, Michael?
Yeah, Signs of Destiny was actually the first presentation that I ever gave, and that was the catalyst of the Chandler formation. And that day was interesting because I kind of warmed up the podium for for Whitley Strieber, so
Really?
I was a
Wow.
little bit nervous that day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whitley Strieber is one of the top-notch guys there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that again, that was my first speaking engagement. There's about 300 people there, and Chet had those conferences every year, and it was a great gathering. And I don't think those exist anymore. But that talk was really when I got my feet wet, and I absolutely had a fear of speaking in front of crowds, like most people do. But I found at that time, my biggest lesson was when you experience something like that and you are passionate about something like that, you'll get through that talk
Yeah.
because it's coming from the heart, and it's a whole different experience. So that was the first one. Now the MUFON talks were more in depth with the Chandler formation. I really went into the lab work that was done and the difference between man-made and authentic.
Mhm.
And that whole presentation kind of morphed into the healing properties. And as a certified sound healer as well, sound, frequency, vibration, all of that has always been fascinating to me. And then I started to look deeper into the formations and their healing aspects and the medicinal aspects of what they offer. So there's codes in the formations, there's healing aspects, there's a lot of things that the formations are telling us and have been telling us for a long time. So those presentations for MUFON, very valuable. Just right when you said that, I jogged my memory that one of those presentations were is actually about what was going on in the Antarctic area.
Yes, you mentioned that in your notes.
Yeah,
I'm
and
interested in that, Michael. Tell us about that.
well, and at the time it was I didn't want to be very redundant because it was probably the time that I think Corey Good was talking about things like that, and David Wilcock was talking about things like that, and I didn't want to just parrot what they were saying, but I had a lot to say about it because I had done research and found things that I wasn't hearing from other people. So at the time, I chose to put together a timeline
Mhm.
of how the whole Arctic region thing started, and it went all the way back. I mean, I was surprised at the time to see it went back to I think like World War I, and then of course moved into World War II and Nazi Germany and the Third Reich and Hitler and all the occultism, and I mean you name it. It was it was pretty eye opening. It was well received, and you mentioned about being censored and kind of shadow banned. It
Right.
was interesting because that the weekend of that presentation was also of the last, I think, significant solar eclipse, and I was in Sedona at the time and viewed the solar eclipse, and then went down and gave my presentation, and it was an amazing weekend. You mentioned Travis Walton. When I looked out into the crowd, Travis Walton was in like the first row at my presentation, which again, wow.
Yeah.
Uh, so I made sure it was it was good, and I
Yeah.
didn't say and ah and ooh too many times.
Well, I
And
saw Travis when he first started, and he was a little nervous too. And then he got his pace and his timing down, and
yes,
so he become more of a speaker. It does take time, but the other thing I want to make an observation in speaking in public about this topic of UFOs, crop circles, and everything. You got these naysayers. You got 300 people out there, you said, and you got these naysayers out there. And what's very, I guess, it just disturbs me a little bit that you got these people that'll roll their eyes when you mention a
oh,
certain topic, and when you see that, it kind of discourages you. And so that's why speaking live to a crowd, if you're sensitive to those types of people, and I'm kind of an empath, and I think you are too,
yeah,
or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, and you can
oh yeah,
sense when people are rolling their eyes without even seeing it. They're thinking about, oh, okay, all right, tell us another one. That's what this subject's all about. There's half people who believe it, half of them won't. And even a
yeah,
crowd of 300, there some of them are coming here because of the curiosity. They're not really believers, and they're going to roll their eyes, and they're going to hang their head and look up at you like, okay, tell us another. Did you feel that, Michael, that there's a difference in different people, 50-50 way, maybe?
yeah, definitely. And I think
Disclosure. You might want to mention disclosure in there too as you're talking. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it was interesting because that time of the Chandler formation where I gave the presentation, the first one, I was also asked to speak at a local high school in Chandler, and that's where the eye rolling came in. The Signs of Destiny conference was pretty good because I think they were there and they were already of that consciousness. So it was a good experience. The high school one, shortly after that, was a little rough because there was the media was there,
Mhm.
and there was a very sweet older lady who was a reporter, and she asked a lot of good questions of me, and she was very sweet. And then I think in the following week, when I read her article in in like the Chandler local newspaper, she really made me sound like a California born whack job is what she did.
Oh,
And
man.
it was a hit job. It really was. It was she made me sound like a UFO kook, and what I was saying was just horrible. And that was my first experience. Like, oh yeah, she was really nice, and she was very honest. And well, I learned that what you see is not always how it is, and
Right.
that was a big lesson.
Mhm.
And with the disclosure conversation, it's a deep one for me, and it's kind of a frustrating one for me because from what we spoke about earlier, we we take things with a grain of salt because we've kind of been burned in the past from time to time, and we go, okay, is this an agenda? Is this a part of an agenda? Is
Mhm.
it somewhat of an agenda, but not so much an agenda? You find a lot of people who are in the disclosure realm who are not fessing up to a lot of the stuff that we may already know. The drip drip disclosure aspect has always been frustrating for me
Mhm.
because for you and I, disclosure happened a very long time ago.
Yes.
We already have a pretty good idea of what's going on, but when it's this huge political monster doing it the right way, yeah, it gets a little dicey at best. I can tell you when I spoke at a conference in, I think it was 2019 in South San Francisco. I also spoke just prior. Again, I seem to be I warm up the podium for a lot of good people. Now I think about it.
Well, that's
I
good, actually. It's where
well,
you need to
yeah,
start. Yeah. Yeah.
I spoke just before, and I had to kind of cut it a little bit short so Daniel Sheehan could take the stage. And as you know, I mean, Daniel's knee deep in this, and he's an amazing individual, and he knows the law inside and out.
Mhm.
And I like to follow things that Daniel talks about because I know he's on the up and up. He always has been, in my opinion.
Right.
And that guy is flawless in his delivery. And when he talks about political um, agendas and where this, UFO, and mind you, I always say UFO because even when I say UAP, I have a problem with that because UAP to me is when they started to take over that topic and then they want to own it. So we're going to call it something different. We're going to call it this instead of what it was. Maybe it's just a little trigger for me, but I just like kind of the UFO thing and
And what I heard, Michael, was that the reason why they changed it to UAP is because they're saying that a lot of them are man-made, devices that are flying around out there. That's why the
right,
government said that because they know more than we know about what they have in their arsenal and what they're flying out there. Uh,
right.
to close up, we're actually, we're getting into this hour, and it goes by so quick, and I've
Yeah.
enjoyed all of this, and you
Yeah. If you had a little more time, we can do that. If not, we can end it and do it next time too. Whatever is good for you, Dave.
Okay, well, whatever you want to get into your topics here. I know I got a couple of topics I want to talk to you about, but Antarctica, I like to flashback to that. And I
Mhm.
had a gentleman on my show, Eric J. Hecker, and he's been out there outspoken quite a bit right now, and he's
Mhm.
drawing a lot of national attention about his stories about Antarctica and the dew weapon that they have up there, and also they have, I guess, a base up there that they have things that can create earthquakes and all. This is what he's speaking. This is not from me, and this is for educational purposes on this show that we're talking about that. This is what he says about it, and actually Dr. Stephen Greer, I guess, also backs him up in that idea. But how is he going out and speaking about all this and having just himself as proof? I'm not sure
Mhm.
how that works. Uh,
Right.
but I know Eric. Like I said, I've had him on my show a couple of times. He's a very tough guy. He's very straightforward, and he's been a hardcore agency guy, I guess, and he worked in Antarctica for a year, and he found out all this stuff. So, kudos to him for that. But like I said, I'm not saying on this show that I believe everything that's being said about that. That's to be found out to be so we're not trying to spread conspiracy theories. This is what he's talking about. I'm just repeating from sources, and there's been a couple of good news sources that he's talked through about this also. So I don't want I don't want to get in trouble with the platforms out there for sure. This is I'm just talking about sources. Uh, Now you had some experiences with Antarctica. Was that more of a I guess remote viewing or something, Michael?
Yeah, it was more based on research. There actually was, remote viewing involved to a certain extent, but it was probably the first really researching presentation kind of endeavor that I traveled outside of my personal experience.
Right.
So in that presentation, and I think it was a strong 2.5 hour presentation. It was a long one. Um, I used the word allegedly in that presentation quite a bit
Mhm.
because it was just based on just bringing together every possible puzzle piece and going back as far as I could. And speaking of Linda Moulton Howe, she's had a lot of insiders over the years, and I looked at a lot of her information and just dug as deep as I could go. Admiral Byrd, I went into that quite deeply,
Mhm.
and you know James Forrestal and his untimely death
Yeah.
that happened from a very high building at the time, which I think it was the
26,
hospital.
yeah, 26 stories, I think, was it something like that?
Yeah, and it all really pieced together to the point of a lot's been going on down there for a very long time. Absolutely, there's amazing land and the underwater. what is it, the heat vents, and there is absolutely a lot of information that would help you reach the conclusion that it's been occupied down there. How much of was it a Fourth Reich? Was it in conjunction with Nordic type beings? The craft that came out and really put paperclip, or rather high jump, that whole mess with Bird. I mean, it was obviously labeled as a scientific expedition, and it was anything but that. It was all out confrontation,
Mhm.
and that's fact. That's I mean, there's the damage, the loss of life, the planes, the aircraft carriers. You can't say that that was just somebody's experience. That really did happen. So there's a lot of puzzle pieces that needed to be put together, and that's kind of what I attempted to do with that timeline. And I
Right.
know with
There was
visitor,
a military operation, just like you said, and it's documented. And there
yes,
was some kind of a fight going on. Now, some of that's been suppressed. So yeah, and
yes,
then there's also people who have seen objects and flying saucers, they call them, down there in the Antarctica. And there's been,
right,
I guess, Linda Moulton Hall has a lot of that. Those
hmm,
people and that's evidence and facts. But this is not conspiratorial. We're talking
no,
actual, history that's been stated, and the platforms are, they watch that very closely. We're not
yeah,
spreading conspiracies. This is true facts.
you
Uh,
bet.
you were also co-creator of the Phoenix Rising groups. Could you tell us about that? Embracing contact in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Yeah, that was an attempt to really get together, and I was with a very interesting group of people to put that together, and there was a few individuals that helped put that conference together, and that was my first attempt at putting a conference together.
Mhm.
Individuals that were played a big role in the information and documentary of the Phoenix Lights um, experience, I should say. And we felt it was a good idea to put together a conference that really emphasized embracing contact, because that is, in my opinion, inevitable.
Mhm.
And I think we're getting closer and closer to that as we speak on a larger scale. Again, you and I believe we have had contact already, but on a
Right.
larger scale, it's trying to educate the public in a more positive way than maybe Hollywood has done over the years.
Right. Right.
And I find that there may be another conference like that on the horizon, because we got a really good um, feeling and good positive feedback from that conference. And it was just it was at a resort in Scottsdale at the time, and we probably had 100 people that attended that, and it was really a good experience. And I think we're at a time right now that, and we seem to make jumps. Like every decade, there seems to be some kind of a jump um, in consciousness, and well, kind of what we're seeing with the disclosure situation. It is coming along. We are making strides. The conversation is on mainstream news. Whether people think that's, yeah, it's a ploy, it's an agenda, it's not really beneficial. The fact of the matter is, the conversation is out there in mainstream.
Right.
And, just like in the movie Contact, little steps, Ellie, little steps. And we do have to do that, or else, when you get in a think tank and you really talk about these things, if something just blows up immediately, there's going to be, some casualties in society. And I think we're trying to educate people, so that softens the blow a little bit, but it's
Right.
also, it makes sense of this, and shows there's a history. It's not all just happening now. This has been going on a long time. And I think that's really the main thing of, we go back to the question about our existence. It's like we need to be told who we are, and really where we come from, and how the human being does not fall into the category of our normal thought of what evolution is. You know, nature
Hmm.
evolution is a thing, and it is in nature. We could look at that in the records, but that evolutionary hypothesis falls apart where we're concerned.
Right. And we have to also understand that we are of two. We have a physical body, they call it the flesh suit, and we have the spirit and the soul, and that's what goes on. And a lot of people wonder, well, why doesn't God concern himself with young kids or people dying? Well, I don't think God, my answer to that is I don't think God's too much worried about our physical bodies. He's worried, he's concerned about our soul and our spirit. And that's what goes back to the great creator, like we talked about earlier. Uh, you mentioned here embracing contact and the CE5 group, Dr. Stephen Greer has that. How does your theories of embracing contact, does it coincide with CE5 groups, how they do contact, Michael?
Yeah, very good question, Dave. Early on, and I will say 2008, 2009, I had a chance to do a CE5 with Dr. Greer
Hmm.
um, in, I think it was the Scottsdale area. And that that kind of showed me what that whole thing was about. And then later in life, and I would say it played a role in the Chandler formation. It's played a role in numerous of what I call contacts, which is more communication.
Right.
Um, that I will go out, I will have a knowing, and I've been lucky enough to be able to take pictures, to take videos of usually daytime craft, and and again that's has spanned from California to Arizona and in between. And 9 times out of 10, it is usually some form of what you would call CE5 protocol. It's just going within. It's really, it's just having that communication. And I would say it's no coincidence that the times that I've had the deepest, the most consistent meditative practice, maybe watch my diet a little bit more, which I'm pretty much a 80% organic eater. I was a vegan vegetarian for a decade, and I've done it all, and I know where I feel the best. And I'm a big juicer. I again do the energy work, but it still seems to come down to that consciousness aspect where again there is a communication. And I found out with the crop formation phenomena, CE5 protocol, and I think it's a very, very integral part of what we're dealing with here. And I think Dr. Greer has known that for many years. And I know a lot of people, I hear this stuff on the periphery too of, oh, Dr. Greer, that guy, he's a shill. He's working both sides of the fence. He's doing this,
Yes,
he's doing
I
that.
heard.
Well, if you truly believe that, then that's perfectly fine. But I would invite you to try to extract the things that are beneficial for you
Yeah.
and leave the rest of the stuff that are not, because I think he has a lot to contribute, and he has contributed quite a bit. Disclosure Project, 1999, 2000. I mean, his record speaks for himself. Do I agree with everything that he does or says? No, I don't, because I've had, just maybe different experiences.
Hmm.
But overall, I think the CE5 is very beneficial. If you don't want to do his protocol or it's too expensive, you can do that with yourself. You are that conduit to
Yes.
what you're trying to communicate with.
Right.
So by all means, you should do that.
You mentioned a key word, a trigger word to me in your discussion there. And it's actually, there was a movie that was out. It's The Knowing. And you said you had a knowing. Could you explain that to us, Michael?
Yeah. Well, first, um, as these talks are usually synchronistic, just like you and I are having right now, Dave, there's usually never any. any mistakes. I would say last week I just rewatched that movie, The Knowing,
Yes.
after many, many, many years of totally forgetting about it. And I will say that's up there with probably some of the better ones. Not giving away details or the spoilers. It's a very accurate movie. Now, the knowing is the word that I've kind of used and replaced. What would I say? I've always hesitated to say telepathic communication because for me it doesn't feel like a two-way conversation like you hear some people say. They go, "Oh yeah, we were telepathing and they told me this and I answered this," and it's like, wow, I've never had that.
Yeah.
But then I really thought about, well, what do I have? And the word knowing is the perfect fit. For example, um, I have always had the ability to feel something like it's going to happen, and almost like preemptive or precognitive would be a good word too,
Yes.
to be called outside. And I know you've heard this before too. It's no different. I'm not the only one.
Yes.
And I'll go out with my phone, which these days is my camera, binoculars possibly, and I will be directed to a location in the sky. And when I look, and I'm not talking about, oh, it must be here somewhere. It must be here somewhere. No, it's I'll walk out, I'll stand there, and then I'll feel something behind me, and I'll look, and where I look, I'm looking directly at it. It's like bullseye first throw of the dart. It's right there. It's waiting for my eyes to see it, and it is a knowing. I can't explain that other than that's a communication for me that I've just learned what that feels like. Uh,
I know how you feel, Michael. I've had that happen to me.
yeah.
I got really tired. Sometimes in the abduction process, they make you tired first. I imagine they're telepathic.
Mhm.
They're sending energy to you, then making you tired, and then you go lay down, and then they do the rest. Then that's when it starts. But I've also been told to go somewhere, and about 3 or 4 different times I was told to go somewhere, and when I did, I saw a craft
There
and
you go.
and something happened in a time slip or whatever. But yeah, they tell you you can it's in your head. It's a telepathic.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a driving force. That's just like you and I wanting to enlighten people with what we've learned, and that's what I do all the time. That's why I write my books. That's why I'm doing these shows, is because I want to enlighten people what's going on. And you just said it. The knowing is part of that abduction process in a way. You were kind of slightly abducted, but you were shown something. Now I wanted to get back to disclosure because I have a feeling that right now that 50% of the Pentagon don't want disclosure. The other 50% say, yeah, let's go for it. They tried to have a meeting, a Senate meeting, a hearing in Florida. The Pentagon backed off and said, no, we don't want to meet. We don't want to discuss this any further. I think there's powers to be, the big elites, not the military or not maybe Washington, but the people who run this world. And there's 13 big families, rich,
Yeah.
wealthy families. And there's also, like I said, powers to be. I don't want to get into conspiracies. This is just for educational purposes, but there are powers above our politicians, and
Right.
they control the world. And I think they're the ones who are wanting to slow this drip of disclosure because there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know, and which could be maybe bad for mankind. We don't know that yet either. That's just conspiracy, but let's just leave it at that. What are your thoughts about that, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, first of all, very very good point. And I think there's so many moving parts to this.
Mhm.
Um, as much as I would like, and I think you would like, they're like, okay, just come out with it. Just let us know we're not alone. They're out there, and let's move on with our life. They kind of did that in 2017, and we woke up the next morning, and The sun rose in the east and set in the west, and life went on. But what's interesting is that they realize, when I say they, whoever they are, and in conjunction with the government, deceiving and withholding information, aka maybe lying,
Mhm.
for so long, they have really painted themselves in a serious corner, because you know as well as I do that this disclosure can't be stopped. It can only be slowed, and they've done a very good job of it for a very long time.
Right.
But now you're getting individuals who are of a different generation. Whatever people think about, is it David Grush?
Right.
Individuals like him. A lot of the individuals from the 40s, 50s, they're no longer with us. And there is a different generation of individuals who are like, hey, it's 2024. We need to get this information out, and I am going to infringe upon my oath, and I am going to say what I have to say.
Right.
And people are doing that now. See, for me, that is the authentic part of what's happening here. The reaction to what's happening here is a whole different game. So you mentioned the drip drip. They are really trying to think of how are they going to handle this? And that's the main question, because of the implications of who we are, number one, that we're not alone, that we've had access, and I won't go so far as say functional access, although I do believe we do,
Right.
that we've had access to technology that we should be, as you know, hundreds of years in advance of where we are currently.
Well, somebody is, I think.
Oh, I think so
Yes.
too. And
Yeah.
and I'm the firm believer, and I think this was a part of my Antarctic
Mhm.
presentation was, I think definitely there is an aspect, and many will agree, many will disagree, that we obtained that technology, and an aspect of human mankind, went off planet a long time ago. And if you are to, believe the amazing information of William Tompkins, Bob Wood, all those gentlemen, I mean, you can't help but think, wow, there is an aspect of all of this that the average layperson is not aware of.
Yeah. Uh,
They've never been aware of it, and now it's time to bring it out. But it's just that that lashing back of when they find that out, they meaning us, it's really got to be handled carefully. And I think that's where we're seeing this delay.
right.
What the hell do we do once it comes out?
Right. I think
That's where we find ourselves.
I think if we make contact and disclosure with the ETs, that us regular average people will find out a lot, and that will slow down the elites and the
Yeah,
powerful into what their agenda is. It could interrupt their agenda, so that's probably why disclosure is being drip, drip, drip. Okay,
absolutely.
let's talk about the final topic here. And today, I'm sure I might see a little bit of this in Illinois, the lunar eclipse. Uh, you had that your Native American family connections have any bearings on your beliefs. What does the Native American culture think about this solar eclipse? And then we'll sum it up and go from there,
Right.
Michael.
Well, yeah, the indigenous, the Cherokee is on my mom's side.
Mhm.
Um, Grandfather was, I believe, was born and raised in Oklahoma, so Trail of Tears
Yes.
area. And my dad's side is very Mediterranean, so Sicilian, Italian, you name it. So it's a very interesting mix. I usually get the jokes about, oh, you must like spaghetti and fry bread jokes, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, which I do actually.
Well, I'm a mixture too. I mean,
Yeah,
German, Indian, English. So Yeah, I got a mix, and also my that DNA thing, whatever, 23 and Me, whatever. They told me
Right.
I had 4% Mediterranean in me, and I said, I can't figure that out.
There you
And I said,
go.
where's the Native American Indian? They said, well, we don't have the basis for that test because we haven't taken a
Right.
base tracking system of the Native American Indian. A lot of Native American Indian, tribal leaders, they don't want DNA a test done on them, so they
No.
can't really determine overall, what I'm made up of. And I know I do because my
Yep.
grandparents are pro-Indian. So it's
Exactly.
but it's interesting. So what do you think, Michael, this lunar eclipse will do besides awakening most of people who are starting to get
Yeah.
I don't want to say we use the word woke. That's not that's a
Yeah.
political word, and we don't want to go
Yeah.
there. That's just for entertainment, okay? But
The
what do
awakened.
you think the awakening is furthermore after this lunar eclipse?
Well, I personally, I think, well, first to address the indigenous aspect, I think, yeah, I've just really embraced more of my connection with the planet, with Mother Earth, the elements, even the spirit realm through the indigenous perspective.
Mm,
I've done a lot of sweat lodges, a lot of shamanic work with some amazing teachers. Freehawk actually came from one of those elders in 2009 near the Four Corners.
yeah.
And that's a long story, but it was magical. And Freehawk was given to me in ceremony from
Mhm.
an elder I had never met before and I never seen since. And it was otherworldly. I'll just say that, and that's why I choose to carry that in a lot of my presentations or Facebook, what have you. So it's played a huge role in my personal evolution and my respect for just life in general.
Mm,
Now, the solar eclipse, I really think that the negative things that we're hearing about it is mostly based in mythical medieval times before we knew any better. And there are unfortunately a lot of we'll say aspects of humanity that choose to use something like the eclipse to harness less than stellar energies, shall we say, for their own purposes, usually nefarious.
mhm.
But on the other hand, see, people have to be reminded it can be used for the very opposite of that. Energies are energies. It all depends on how you're using it. What is your intention? And what are you choosing to use that for? For light or dark, that's up to us.
Right.
So I think this solar eclipse, which may be right around the totality now, I'm not sure what it's 11:22 my time. Um,
Yes,
so as
somewhere.
we're talking about this, it may be right about there.
Yeah,
That
I'm
it
gonna probably experience a little bit lighter, but I'm not gonna experience the full, but
right,
I'll probably experience
exactly. So
70%. Yeah.
I think Dave, what you mentioned, I think it is. I think it's going to play a significant, substantial role in the individuals who are awakening, and they have been awakening for some time. These energies are only going to assist in their, I would say, their consciousness, their unfoldment of their journey. And I really think this time is to it's really unpacking our gifts. And there's a point where we have these gifts. We can talk about having these gifts all we want, but
Mhm.
it's like information. What good is it? And what good are they if we're not utilizing these gifts and these tools?
Right.
So I think we're being asked to use these tools, and I think the solar eclipse is going to add to this tool belt of ours, and it's only going to help us. And I think it's nothing but positive.
Right. I think hopefully in the morning I'll wake up and I won't have that cloud around my head when I try to wake up and drink my coffee, and it'll all be gone, and I'll feel better, and then I'll have a better direction, and I'll have a better life, and I'll be able to remote viewing. I can, so I can do it better, and consciousness is something I got to work on because the meditation I just can't relax enough to do that. It's a talent, I guess. You got to develop that meditational talent and that consciousness and to be more awakened. Uh,
Right. Well, it's like anything else, Dave. It's like you can say you go to the gym every single day to work out. Well, going to the gym could mean you're sitting in the parking lot at the gym. Well, you went there,
Yeah.
but did you go in and do the work? That's the thing. So a lot of us are just right on the cusp, but we haven't really started that workout yet. But then again, there is some of us who are actively doing that work, and there's some places for improvement, and
Mhm.
that's okay. I mean, if you see where you need to improve upon, that's a part of the journey, and that's perfectly fine. So it gives you
I
something to look forward to the next day.
I must admit, I'm an old guy and I'm working out 3 times a week,
Okay.
and I do the stationary 15 minutes and I do 14 machines. It three
Wow.
sets for about 16, 3 sets, about 16 reps each. So I'm covering a lot of ground in about an hour and 20 minutes, and it's a kind of a cardiovascular. Is it too
Wow.
much for this little guy? Maybe, but I just keep going.
Yeah.
Michael, I got to keep going. I got to keep doing these shows, and I got to keep writing my books. And matter of fact, I told you my sci-fi book that I'm going to be finished. I'm finished with it. I just have to kind of proof it and then send it off to the publisher. But my hero in it, and I told you earlier, is a Native American Indian, and I picked the Cree Nation, for him to be, the lead in this whole sci-fi
Ooh,
book. And it's sci-fi is different for me because my other 3 books are more or less fiction. My
cool.
UFO book, my Angel book, and then my Senseless Wars book.
Right.
They're more or less, taken from from my own experiences and also some research and investigation. But
Wow.
this book is totally from the head. It's sci-fi, but it combines all 3 of my books' experiences in combat and then also with the ETs. So it's coming
Wow.
from a realistic way. But yeah,
Right.
the Native American culture really excites me, and I always enjoy it. And of course, I got some Native American blood. But I want to close off by asking you, Michael, is there anything you want to close with? Anything you want to tell people?
Well, I would say just hang on tight.
Yeah,
There's a lot of tumultuous times ahead. But to be honest, I think we are exactly where we're supposed to be.
I think
I
so.
think we're exactly where we need to be. Again, I mentioned earlier we're an intentional species, and I think we are. We're you've maybe heard it before. I firmly believe that we're the ground crew. We are here to anchor in everything that's happening on this planet right now, and to be alive at this time. Uh, not everybody agrees with me. They think it's horrible. They think it's just terrible. But the optimist in me looks at what's going on in this world right now as such a blessing, such a gift. Like I'm a part of this.
Mhm.
I'm going to see some amazing changes, God willing. I'm going to see these changes right before my eyes, and to think that I was a part of this collective, um, I would say, push to make this change. And I think where we're going is an amazing, amazing place. None like it in human history, I don't believe.
Mhm.
And it's an honor to be here. So
Okay, great. We're going to be closing the show with that. And could you tell us where we can get a hold of you? I know if you look up Google, it's just like me. I tell people, I said, well, if you get lost, just Google me, my name
right.
and abduction and ETs, and you'll get all kinds of stories and all kinds of shows and things that I've been on. The same thing with you. If they Google you, they'll find you,
Oh
but
yeah.
you also have you're on Facebook and you do a lot of your communication through Facebook, and that is what was that? That was Facebook. A name was let me see here. I got it here on this page here. It's a www.facebook.com forward
Ooh,
slash Michael Polani, and that's forward slash, and you can find
right.
Michael there on Facebook, and I'm sure if you Google him, you'll find him also, right along with all these other alphabet people that look.
Yeah. Yeah. All the platforms. I think Michael Freehawk. I think I'm the only Michael Freehawk that comes up. So yeah, your Facebook, your Instagram. I've got a very small abbreviated YouTube page that actually the YouTube page. I think it should be Michael Freehawk. If it's not, just message me. And I have a handful of my daytime sighting videos located there
Okay,
that you
great.
could see a lot of my contacts and things like that. So
Maybe next
reach
time,
out.
yeah, maybe next time we have you on, you can have those videos in a file, and then you can share them on this Zoom channel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'd love to.
Okay, great. We've been talking to Michael Freehawk Polani, and he's from the West Coast. I want to say exactly where, but I'm from the Middle West, and this is Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality. And thank you so much for doing the show, Michael. You were very eloquent in your speaking and very detailed, and I really like that. Thank you so much. And
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. I look forward to the next.
yes, we will do another show, and I'm sure people will be liking what you have to say here. Thanks to everybody for listening and future listening. This is pre-recorded, but it'll be released in a day or two, so we'll get it out there pretty quick. Thank you, Michael, and for being on the Strange Reality. Good night, all.